Today's Homeowner with Danny Lipford. Real projects for real homeowners with real solutions. Information and inspiration on improving your home from professional remodeler Danny Lipford.
Hello and welcome to the show. Now, you know, painting is one of those projects that homeowners feel fairly comfortable taking on themselves. But professional painters have all kinds of tricks of the trade that makes the job go a little easier. Well, this week we'll look at a number of those tips, including exterior painting, interior painting, and even faux painting. Now, you won't be an expert at the end of this show, but you'll be a lot more prepared for your next paint project. Stay with us. Here you are, John. Welcome back to the show. Now, the first step in getting your home ready to paint on the exterior is to properly prepare all of the surfaces. Now, John Starling, our painter, is in the process of just using a hammer to drive up any of the nails that may have backed their way out. The sun really has a tendency to make these nails back out, and what that does is it creates a little place for rain to get in and cause you a lot of water damage. Now, the next step after he gets all of his nails driven up well is to use a good quality scraper and go around the perimeter of any of the siding boards and scrape any of the loose paint that you can find, and around any of the wires to scrape any of that loose paint. And what you're really doing is using the scraper everywhere that you can't get your sander into in order to do the work for you. Now, I need to caution you, if you're in a home that was built in 1978 or before, you may have lead in the paint on the outside of your house. So make sure you have it tested, and if it turns out that you do have lead in your paint, well, then check with the Environmental Protection Agency on the safe guidelines in order to properly remove that paint. Now, the top coat on your outside of your house may not have lead on it, but the inspector can determine if any undercoats that you may encounter while you're scraping or sanding contains lead, and they can certainly help you figure out exactly what to do. Now, after John completes all of the scraping that he's doing now, it's time to break out the sanders. Most painters like to use a 5-inch disc sander with a 60 to 100 grit paper. Also, any smart painter will also use a respirator and safety glasses. Now, the intention here is to use the sander to not only remove any loose paint, but to feather out the edges of the old paint. Now, some homeowners have caused damage to their wood siding by not keeping the sanding pad nice and flat. So the best way to avoid this problem is to keep the disc sander moving. Now, in most cases, it's not necessary to remove all of the paint, just the loose paint. Now, when you're buying your sanding pads, make sure you buy plenty, because to save time and get the best job, you will want to change out the pads frequently. Now, sanding is the most time-consuming part of preparation, but the most essential. Now, when you finish sanding, it should look a lot like this, with a little bit of raw wood, a little bit of existing paint, but hopefully no lines in between, because after you apply your primer and your 2 top coats, you want it to be a nice smooth surface. Now, usually at this point, homeowners start thinking about caulking all of the cracks around the outside of their house, but actually it's much better to wait until all of the primer's on and good and dry, so that your caulking will really have something to adhere to. Now, that's exactly the reason why primer is so important, so that you apply the primer to the raw wood and the 2 top coats will really have something to hold on to. That's probably the reason this side of the house has done so badly over the years, is it was never primed properly. You can apply primer with a brush or a roller. Now, most painters prefer brushing because it allows you to force the primer into the pores of the wood. Now, in this case, we're doing what is called spot priming, which means we're only coating the raw areas. Now, if you're experiencing excessive peeling over your entire exterior of your home, you may need to prime the whole thing. Now, different primers have different drying times. Now, we're using an oil-based primer that you can start recoating in only 2 hours. John, you really prefer the oil-based primers over the latex, I guess.
Oh yeah, I prefer the oil-based better than the latex, simply because it seals the wood, it seals the nail heads, keep the rust from coming back through.
Okay. And with a drying time of only a couple hours, by the time you get to the end of the building, you can start back with the painting.
Right, once we caulk, we can start painting.
Okay, let's talk about caulking. Some of the areas we'll be caulking here include the joints between the siding, around the windows, and a few other minor cracks. Yeah, that's looking great, John. Well, after all of the sanding, the priming, and the caulking, John's applying the first of 2 coats that'll finish up this side of the house. Now, that's the real key to making a paint job last, is to apply 2 coats, not just 1, so that you build up enough millage and thickness in the paint to protect the house from the elements. Also, John showed us a great trick in applying the paint using a small cigar roller, which is just a very small type of roller frame, applying the paint with that and then smoothing it out with a good 4-inch quality brush. Now, interior painting is something many homeowners will try themselves, but to really get some good tricks and how to make the job go easier, Lee Ross Paint Contractor is going to share a lot of those with us. Now, if a viewer is about to paint their bedroom, where do they start?
Well, the first thing, Danny, is they want to make sure they have quality tools. Go ahead and buy some good tools, high-end handles, high-end roller covers, things of this nature. It'll last you forever. Make sure everything's covered up. Make sure you've got drop cloths out. Get everything off the walls, of course. Pull all your furniture to the center of the room. And then make sure all the trim and walls are clean.
Okay, all right. What about caulking some of the joints around the room?
Well, you want to make sure you caulk, of course. And Perry's doing some caulking back here right now. So where you go along, make sure all the cracks are filled in, nice and even and neat. No buildup, so it's going to look good when the paint goes over it.
Okay. Now, paint the walls first, trim first?
Well, you want to paint the walls first, Danny, and then do your trim second, because it does lay on top of the walls. You want to do it in a layered fashion, so paint your walls first.
Okay, what about technique on that? I've seen some homeowners go in there with that roller and just go straight up and down vertically and ends up not looking very good.
Yeah, you really don't want to do that. There are certain rules for everything, and it applies here too. You want to apply your paint in a W-type fashion across the wall, 3 or 4 feet out, come back, roll up and down, smooth it out, lay it out nice and neat, and then move on with another W and carry on like that.
Okay. Now, when you're talking about trim, you know, of course, here we have a primed piece of trim that you're using on this new door unit. But what about existing trim in the situation with oil over latex, latex over oil, that kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of rules that apply there, Danny, like in anything. And you really don't want to put a latex paint over an oil base. There's a chance it'll come off. There are things you can do. One thing you can do is you can prime over that oil-based finish and then come back with a latex finish. And there's also products that you can talk to your paint store about that are made to go right over oil base, and they're a latex base.
Okay, all right. What if your trim is stained and you're kind of tired of it and you're ready to paint it? The different approach there.
Right, there is. In that case, you've got to deal with the tannin coming back through the finish that you put on it. Tannin is in the stain. It's just a stain that'll come back through the paint. So you want to use a stain blocker, like they use in insurance work when they paint over smoke and things like this. You know, they want to block that out first. So you use a stain blocker first, then come back with your latex or your oil finish.
Okay, now what if you're a bit of a novice and you're only wanting to paint the walls and not get that wall paint on the trim? What do you recommend on that?
Well, in that case, you want to use it just like they do when they paint a car. You want to mask off all the areas you're not going to paint. And they make a special tape for this. It's a blue tape. It's called painter's tape. And your paint store can tell you about that. Just mask all that off nice and neatly, paint right up against the tape. When you pull the tape back, you got a nice straight edge.
Okay, now what if you have wallpaper on your wall and you're tired of that old pattern from the 70s and the colors there? You really don't have to take that wallpaper down all the time.
Not every time, Danny. It really depends. If the wallpaper was put up well with a good adhesive, and if it stuck well, give it a test, pull it back. If it feels like it stuck well, then you can go ahead and paint over that wallpaper. Now, of course, you want to concern yourself with the seams where the wallpaper joins. You want to go along and kind of push those seams into the wall, like with the handle of a screwdriver or something like that. Just push it into the wall, and come back with your spackling compound like you use for your nail holes on your walls.
Right.
And then just float over, or take your blade and just, you know, spread that spackling compound over that lightly, and then come back and lightly sand once it dries, then paint right over it.
Okay. Of course, if you have some of that wallpaper with a real thick texture, you've got a problem there, don't you?
Right, you do.
Okay.
What you've got to do in that case is you've got to come back and just do nothing. Take the wallpaper down, because the relief is going to show through.
Great. Hey, these are some great tips and good tricks of the trade you've shared with us. And now, if you're thinking of doing some painting on the inside of your house, traditional painting always works well, but a real popular approach is decorative painting, faux finishes. And when we come back after this best new product, we'll talk with a decorative painter. Yeah, this is a great technique in the way that you use the different colors, the black and the gold. Really looks great. I'm with David Walton, who's a decorative painter. And David, why is faux finishing so popular all of a sudden?
Well, it's not all of a sudden, Danny. Actually, it's been around for thousands of years. centuries actually, but it's just gained a lot of popularity over the last few years in America. You know, when I first started doing this 8 years ago, people thought, oh, the fad's going to die out real soon, but it's done nothing but pick up really over the last several years.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's stronger than ever, and I really like the way you've done this. What do you call that technique?
Well, this is a marble effect. It's simulating a Pertora or black and gold marble.
Okay, all right. Now see, almost an antiquing look here on the chair rail molding.
Right. I started with a black base and then I stippled a gold effect on top of it.
Oh, that looks great.
Give it a real burnished look.
Yeah, it really does, and has a nice little sheen to it, and also a sheen on the wall. What do you call that finish?
Well, I started with a metallic gold and then added a walnut colored glaze over it to give it an antique look, somewhat like an antique picture frame was kind of what I was shooting for.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll tell you something that's real dramatic is the ceiling that you created here. Now that couldn't have been easy, being 22 feet in the air.
I ran up my chiropractor bill really big on this one. Stiff neck galore.
How did you do it? How did you get that look?
Well, that's done with the ragging off effect. With a taupe on the base color and then a black glaze that I put on and then ragged off.
Well, it all goes together real well, and I'll tell you something I like is the simulation of marble that you have on this wood column. I mean, you really kind of have to tap it a little bit to know that it's actually not marble.
Well, that's the supreme compliment. I love that. You know, because that's what the term faux means, is false in French. And that's where the true meaning is faux. We try to simulate a genuine stone or wood grain.
I see. Okay. Well, I know that you used the same technique in the living room behind us. Tell us about how that worked out.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had a real genuine piece of marble on the fireplace mantle, but we took took stained cabinets and turned them white, and then took the countertops, and I simulated the marble that was on the fireplace. It turned out great, actually. I think better than the true marble.
It looks good. Now, homeowners that want to try this themselves, I mean, some of these techniques are pretty tough, and I'll have to tell you, David has been at this a long time, so it really takes a skill level to achieve some of these finishes. But if a homeowner wants to try, say, a small bathroom themselves, which of the techniques maybe is better for a homeowner to try?
I would recommend a positive, that is applying paint or glaze, say like a sponging or a ragging.
I see. Okay, and I know you did a hallway recently of that here in the same house.
Yes. Danny, what we've got here is a negative ragging technique. It's where I took a taupe-colored wall paint first, a satin finish, and put it on there, and the next day when it was dry, came back with a black glaze. Now that's taking black paint and a glazing liquid. I applied an area at the time, and while it's still wet, I put it on with a brush and roller. While it's still wet, I take clean cotton rags and blot it to remove it. Gets the effect.
Is it very hard to get it nice and consistent like you have there? Is that just an element of practice?
Well, it takes a little work there while it's still wet. It's kind of more tricky than a ragging on where you'd actually just put color on.
Okay, all right. Now, if someone wanted to have you come in to, say, a typical dining room that's 12 by 16, what would it cost after the base coat was applied for you to provide a finish similar to that?
Well, for me, on these basic techniques, probably in the range of $500 to $700, depending on how many colors and exactly what we did.
A lot more reasonable than a lot of wallpaper out there.
From what I hear.
Now, we've looked at a number of ways to make your next paint project go a little easier, but the real sign of a professional painter is one that's very neat when he's doing his work. Now, a trick that a lot of professional painters use when they're painting crown molding like John's doing here, where you're painting straight out of the paint can, is to take a small nail and a hammer and knock a few holes in the perimeter rim of the paint can itself. That way, when you're dipping the paint in and wiping it off, any paint that accumulates here on the top will drain right back into the can. That way, when you're putting the lid back on after you finish your day's work, you won't be splattering paint all over the room you're working in. Now, I hope we've been able to share some ideas with you that'll really help you on your next paint project. And until next week, I'm Danny Lipford.
Get ready to review your fix-it list as Danny and home repair expert Joe Truini show you this week's simple solution.
I'll tell you, it's really frustrating when you spend a few hours out in your yard getting all the leaves up to have the wind come along and blow them right back across the yard.
Well, not only will the wind blow the leaves out of the pile, Danny, but if you have them in a wheelbarrow, it'll also blow them right out of the wheelbarrow. And one solution, of course, is just to drape a tarp over it. But the problem is if the wind's strong enough, it'll blow the tarp right off the wheelbarrow. So here we've come up with a really simple solution that it just requires taking a utility knife and cutting the tarp to the proper size, and then taking a couple of 3-foot-long wooden dowels. You wrap the tarp around the wooden dowel, and put some duct tape down just to hold it.
Now, I love any solution that has duct tape attached. That's got to be good.
Yeah, you're gonna like this one. And then I just punch in a couple of staples in each dowel rod just to keep it from sliding out. Then all you need to do is just drape it over the wheelbarrow, and the rods act like weights to hold down the tarp.
Now, I could see if you were working even with potting soil or any type of mulch or anything that you could actually use this to keep it dry overnight if you didn't finish your job.
Right, often you're working on a couple of day project. Now, the way I have it laid this way, you'll see the rain would get in, but you can also just turn it.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, you can leave it overnight and it'll stay nice and dry.
Yeah, it works great.
But the other thing I really like about this tip is that it's got a second purpose. You can lay it on the ground as you're raking up the leaves.
Oh, okay. All right, great. There you go.
Just rake them right onto the tarp.
Just in time.
Yeah. Got to keep you working, you know. It'll hold quite a bit, too. You could probably rake almost that whole pile right on there.
Okay, perfect.
Right. Then you just grab the 2 dowel rods.
And the tarps are pretty strong. They really, they'll hold a lot of weight.
And then you can lift up, I mean, basically one hand, you can lift up all those leaves, and just as neatly and easily as possible, dump them right into the wheelbarrow.
Now let's join Danny at the Home Center to check out this week's best new product.
Motion sensors on outside lights have been popular for a number of years in many homes, but a lot of homeowners are realizing you can use the same technology inside the home to make it a little safer and definitely more convenient. Let me give you an example. Now, this particular one has the motion sensor that can be mounted either inside or outside of the home. It's operated with using 4 AA batteries. Then you have the receiver that plugs into any outlet in the home. Then you can plug in a lamp or radio or most anything you want into the side of this. Now, this will also handle up to 600 watts of lighting, so it's pretty sufficient for that, and it'll operate up to 100 feet away. Now, let me give you a couple examples of where this can make your life a little easier around the home. Let's say you have a basement in your home and the only switch to the lights in the basement is at the foot of the stairs. Well, if you mount the sensor at the top of the stairs, when you start down the stairs, it'll turn the light on downstairs. The same way it could be if you're bringing in a load of groceries and you can't quite get to that switch. This can sense your motion coming into the garage and turn on a lamp to make it a lot easier and safer for you to get to the inside. Now, you can mount this outside, as I mentioned, to where when someone comes up onto your front porch, it'll turn a light on the inside of the home. So there's a lot of ways that these can be very convenient and make your home a little safer, and it's only $20 and extremely easy to install in your home.
Now let's go outside for Around the Yard with Danny and lawn and garden expert Barbara Katz.
You know, in the springtime when you get to the store and the aisles are just filled with annuals as far as the eye can see, and you've got big pots of them and market packs, and you start loading up your cart and you go through the line, and then you got to pay the bill, and it's just hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You cannot believe you've just spent that much on your garden. I really think that you ought to start exploring the world of annual seeds.
But now, I've tried this, and it takes forever to get any kind of plants up, and then it just doesn't seem like they last very long. I mean, I don't know about that.
Well, it could have something to do with you. I'm not sure, but you might not have picked the right ones. There's things like the foxglove, which is a perennial, and that will take about a year to grow. But some of the other ones, like the asters and the cosmos and some of the impatiens, honestly, if you put them in the ground in the springtime, by the summer and into the fall, you will have a sea of flowers.
Now, I know it's important when you're planting the flower seeds to make sure that you watch where you live in the country because of that frost date is very important.
That's right. They've got to go in after the last frost date, and they really need to go in when the ground is warmed up just a little bit. But, you know, it is really amazing how they'll grow.
Now, what about mixing some of the annuals in with perennial seeds, and then would that help a little bit? And I think it would make you have flowers a little bit longer period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, if you put perennials in, you're hoping that's a lifetime investment, but you'll have some space in between them. So put some annual seeds in, and then you'll just get a complete range of color, and you'll have a gorgeous garden filled with flowers, and you won't have spent as much money.